If you're vulnerable to psychic damage from roguish language, stay away from these gibbering mouths. But if you intend on listening to this podcast about enriching your fantastical group hallucinations, you're too far gone already.
Okay, give me the Wayne's World countdown.
Okay, okay, ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are the brothers, both DMs and players.
I'm the one with the skulls on my dice. I'm Travis.
And I'm the one with an orange cheating dice, Jordan.
Don't trust him. We are the Hook and Chance podcast. So, yeah, thanks for listening and tuning in.
And we are shipping one treasure chest to a random house this week for incredible games.
Oh, we are.
That part's borderline true.
Really? What are we doing? Oh, I was like, I didn't sign off on sending a random treasure chest to somebody.
Kind of, it's true in the sense that Smiley says things are true in the Bones series. Because then he can't tell the difference between his imagination and reality sometimes.
All right, so we're getting to the heart of your problem.
Yeah. Is this a psychology podcast?
Yeah, this time on Hook and Chance podcast, we're going to get into what's wrong with Jordan.
Yeah. Actually, what we're doing is we're talking about 3 solid ways to prepare for a game as a player.
This largely came about because I was on Reddit, delving into the deep, deep chasm that is Reddit.
Yeah.
But specifically about an anecdote that I saw. It was a Reddit user that was looking for advice on being a new player and what are some, basically some tips and tricks on being a new player to D&D. And kind of just how to make the games all awesome. One of the actual respondents of this question said, just show up, which sounds like that person was probably dealing with some other struggles around, people not showing up to their games.
I love people that comment one line and it's a comment that never needed to exist, though.
Yeah, it didn't need to be said in the first place, because presumably you want to show up to D&D. But really, yeah, there's this idea that, as a player, you can just waltz in and
let the DM take care of everything. Just relax. Go on a journey.
No, at least not in our games. And I think we've been very lucky with decent players in general that don't try to foist this on us.
Our point is just that it works way better when everybody's on the same page. Everybody's putting in.
So we kind of got to talking about what would be on your checklist of things to do every game as a player.
Yeah. So there's 3 basic categories that we're going to run you through today. Party planning, playing your character, and bonding your party. So let's get into the first segment.
Yep.
This is the Strategy Stateroom, where inventive and cunning tactics are crafted for when they're needed most.
All right, so the first bit on our checklist here is around organizing sessions and curating kind of group organization. And I think my biggest pet peeve is when people show up late.
Yeah, that's fair. Because the rest of the party's just kind of like, okay, yeah.
Everyone's waiting, like 4 of the 5 are there, they're ready to get started, and there's one person that just saunters in.
And it's totally different if we know it's coming. But if we're just like, sometimes it happens. But
oh man, the ire in the room is like, oh, your character's going to die this week.
we plot ways to kill you off.
The group is in on it, by the way. They're all gonna Julius Caesar you.
Mm-hmm.
And
every time you're late, remember that we are scheming actively.
All right, so as a part of organizing sessions, okay, so let's talk about what goes on that list. So what's one of the first things there?
All right. So having a calendar to curate the group's organization, I think, can be a really useful tool. Like if you're using Google Calendar and you're scheduling your games, because not all of us are lucky enough to do a once a week game. I realize some people's schedules are pretty crazy. So you can schedule it. Everyone can kind of talk about what works
and cancel with a little bit of timeliness. Like, it's really nice, I would say, as a DM, being able to look forward 3 or 4 weeks and say, hey, I know my player is going to be out, so I'm going to have a little extra time to plan or curate, because I think what fuels that fury that I feel inside when somebody cancels a day or so before is that I've said, as a DM at least, I've said no to other social gatherings or things like that.
Yeah.
And I've rearranged my life, happily, albeit, but I've rearranged my life around trying to make sure that I'm prepped for a game.
Yeah.
And then when somebody doesn't show up, it's like, well, I said no to all of those. I said no to... I don't know.
We don't have anything
I don't
else.
do anything else. All
Good
right,
try,
fine.
though.
Yeah, it was a good pitch.
And I think when it is that last minute cancellation, it gets me when the party's in the middle of something big, because the DM has planned for a very tough encounter with the whole party. And when the cleric bails last minute to leave us without any healing, it kind of feels like I thought that I was on a tandem skydive, and then I realized the guy that knows what he's doing behind me is not there.
I've bailed out.
Okay, I gotta handle this on my own.
Let's figure this shit out real quick.
Pull the pulley string.
Yeah, and I mean, when that happens, I think as a player too. Yeah, as a player, when you're kind of expecting what's going to happen next week, like even you as a player, you're thinking, okay, we just ended on the big dragon fight, whatever the case may be. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to look for this because the healer's going to be there.
Yeah.
And then they don't show up.
And
you're
then
like,
you got to change everything.
Alrighty, back to the drawing board. I was thinking about this all week. This took 7 days to figure out. And that's, again, if you're lucky enough like we are to play week.
Yeah. All right, so next on the checklist is having some kind of a online chat that you do the rest of the week, because that's helped us immensely.
Immensely. And I would say from a DM's perspective, me especially, like it's cool being able to watch you as a group kind of formulate plans and figure stuff out and even just like goof around. So we use Facebook chat right now, but I mean, likely use any chat that is kind of ubiquitous among the entire group.
Yeah.
But I would say definitely as a DM, it's super helpful because then I can go, okay, 3 days in advance, you've all kind of laid out your plots. Let me figure out how to kind of mess with those plots and throw things off the rails just enough to keep things interesting.
And we have enough time to actually think of plots with our brains instead of sitting at the table and not using our brains.
On the fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, of course, launches into like having to figure out how to do that on the fly, which never leads to great games. When some person of the group is like, all right, I need a matchstick, a turkey baster, and this is how we're going to defeat the big bad.
That's one of those in theory it's great things, but in practice it never seems to pan out.
No, it never
Nobody's
does.
ever been a successful MacGyver.
I think another point on your checklist should definitely be kind of a note / session note taker person. Yeah. Like
if you sign up for that, then that makes everything easier.
And I would say that so if you have note or session tracking, if you have somebody taking care of treasure, all of the different loot that people have collected
as a group.
Yeah.
Like all the group treasure. I mean, that's usually the way it goes. Some parties play with total individual treasure tracking, but
yeah.
I think that helps.
I think if as a group, you inevitably will end up with shared treasure.
Yeah.
I think the reason these all fall into the same category is if you, as a single player, take one element of these 4 and then dole out the rest to other players in the group, a better world emerges when the load is shared between a group of people and everyone comes together and you're like, oh, I don't have to worry about a thing. And, on the part of the player, it's relatively not that big an ask.
Each of these things is a pretty small task.
Next up is kind of like that other big kind of party planning section, and I think that's why essentially getting together and playing D&D is like throwing a little mini party.
Yeah.
Every time you get together, and one of those big points of the party is food and all that kind of stuff.
Humans need eats.
And how am I supposed to gain like my requisite pound or 2 per week if I don't mow mass amounts of pizza?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mitch, for the pizza. So our point here is that if everybody, again, kind of splits up the tasks of feeding and drinking everybody,
Yeah.
makes it a lot easier.
If one person has to go and do the drinks and the snacks and the pizza and on, that's like an hour and a half's worth of work.
Yeah.
Every time you want to get together and play.
And it really sucks when you put that off until mid-game and then you take an hour and a half out of your game to figure it out on the spot.
So you got all the food and drinks, but I think if you dole it out to individual people, one element on that list, you end up getting the absolute savant that is Mitch, who organizes pizza every week, who has just an immaculate memory of every pizza place and every deal around town. Oh man, he's got that down to an art.
And on top of that, he knows how to charm the pizza people, because on every order, every time, he leaves a custom note, "I love you." And it shows up on our pizza box.
That's why the pizza delivery person keeps giving me these awkward glances.
Yeah.
I do love you. Love you very deeply. Yeah, but honestly, like Mitch knows every deal in town and gets us the best deal on pizzas because that's his role that he plays.
Yeah.
And
if one person brought snacks, one person brought drinks,
like
Jordan around.
Like Jordan said, thank you, Mitch, for all the delicious za.
Mm-hmm. Next on the list,
we're
jumping into accessories, because the DM's got a lot to do, and it really helps if players take on one of these little tasks too.
I think this is a bit of a contentious point for me because I, as a DM, like I've curated music myself.
Yeah.
I've curated a lot of different elements of D&D well in advance. And so I'm not sure I would necessarily dole these out, but I think there's a lot of groups out there that probably would.
That could work together a lot more in this way.
Yeah. Yeah, just because, I mean, it's one thing if you have music that you've already curated.
Yeah.
But if I'm not, I would love for somebody to handle, throwing together a playlist throughout the week.
Yeah. Just adding to it and kind of slowly cultivating
maintaining that. Yeah.
Having a DJ.
That's listening to a lot of movie soundtracks in a Google Play subscription or something like that, or Spotify. Yeah, what else?
Somebody to help dole out the miniatures that are going to be needed that night. I mean, again, sometimes the monster side of it is a DM thing, but even sometimes when we start playing, we're all confused on where our minis are, and we're looking for them for like 10 minutes. So,
and we only have one ongoing game, so I don't know where those minis disappear to every single time. But also putting them away.
I like to wake up at midnight and I hide them around the
house. No, honestly, putting them away is like a 5-minute thing for us sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not naming names, but I've found beer bottles and minis and everything just left exactly where somebody just disappeared and was sucked into the Shadowfell.
Yep. So do all those things, and these will all be on the checklist at the end.
So I think like on the checklist, we have lights, music, minis, distributing writing utensils. Yeah. I think that's kind of handy as long as you have somebody there that's kind of dedicated to that.
And not on the checklist, but don't show up and just wait around while the DM does everything and then jokingly complain about the DM not being ready while you're munching cheesy bit. Because that sucks too.
Don't be a dick. That's the second.
Yeah.
Every second point. We've had people do this at our games sometimes. Just like, and I think that's where this all kind of, the genesis of this checklist came from. Can you imagine the absolute blissful world that we would be living in if just every player just took control of one of these things on the list. Our final point on the accessory side of things, and this is a favorite of mine, is bring a character accessory. This is something that I do for every one of my characters. So you remember my character Oric.
Yeah, half-orc.
What was my accessory?
You had your mug of beer.
My beer stein. And his character actually had the character had a magical beer stein that would fill up with all kinds of different tasty beverages. So I would always fill that up with beer. So that was my
Gets you into character kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, what are the totems from oh, for fuck's sakes. Why can't I remember this kind of shit? The Leonardo DiCaprio Dreamland Man.
You need a totem to make sure you're not dreaming? I know what you're talking about now. Like, are you afraid that you're...
I'm going to slip too much into my character?
Oh.
No. No, but it definitely helps me get into the mindset of my character.
Yeah.
And so this is one that I would wholeheartedly recommend for any new D&D player, even experienced ones. My other character has a tricorn hat.
Yeah.
I found online somebody selling a tricorn hat, so that's my
really cool one.
It doesn't matter, I'm not coming in full costume, but I've got some element of my character that kind of gets me into that.
Hyped about it.
Yeah, just jacked up and into that role, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on the party planning side of a D&D game and what you can do.
Moving on.
Okay, so the second part of our checklist for players is playing your character well.
Okay.
First part of that is going to be the backstory. So the next actual point on our checklist is writing down one goal of your character before you start playing.
So when we're talking about goals, how grandiose are we getting here?
I like to keep goals simple, at least in the beginning, and flesh out my goals throughout play. So if I were setting a level 1 first session goal,
Rule the kingdom.
Certainly wouldn't be rule the kingdom. When you're creating a backstory, you can do it however you want, but usually when sessions start, when campaigns start, it's at level 1 and you're supposed to be starting a grand adventure. So consider that when you're creating a simple backstory versus a grandiose, I've defeated vampires and Dracoliches, and I'm going to go fight a goblin now with my friends and get stabbed with a rusty knife and come close to dying.
Felled low from lockjaw and tetanus.
Yep.
From a rusty dagger from a goblin. That's super true. And I don't know. I think the rules are meant to be broken, but I would say as a general rule, it's safe to say don't make your character some, epic hero.
That's never also, I also like the contrast of creating a superhero backstory, but you've never been heard of when the game starts. It's like, if you were flying on the back of a dragon, the whole kingdom would know.
Yeah. No doubt. That being said, the one time I've ever actually seen this work was when a player actually made a character that was unlocking forgotten secrets. So kind of playing like it's a little bit of a stereotype, but the person with amnesia who's like, who am I? What am I doing?
Oh yeah.
And, kind of taking it back to square one. And I think that's the only place where I've seen an epic backstory actually play out well.
Fair enough.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like everyone always plays a fighter or, whatever the class is, but they've got this really epic backstory. And I think the danger there is making the coolest shit that's ever happened to your character happen prior to the game.
Before the campaign starts. Yeah. And maybe that's just our leaning towards simple.
So would you
starts.
say a good goal would be something for this session? Because, we all have grand goals.
Yeah. Something.
But we're trying to, every day we're trying to achieve something for that day.
Mm-hmm.
So your character logically would as well. So it might be take over the kingdom, but today and what's going to play out in this particular session for you as a player is a smaller goal. I need to get this person to like me, or I need to get this weapon.
Yeah.
Or I need to
get a healer's kit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dig that.
The next point on the checklist would be to work in one flaw.
Work in one flaw. I think there's a fundamental problem of trying to work the flaw in, first of all, that we need to get out of the way. We need to clear the air on. And that is that flaws usually suck. Like, picking a good flaw is the first part of this. So when you're actually generating your character. But then actually, I think the crux of this is you need to pick a flaw that could potentially work its way into the game, into every session, because without flaws to overcome, your character really doesn't do any kind of arc.
Yeah.
Like, you can't grow without a good flaw, but everyone always picks, not everyone. There are great players out there, but I think flaws legitimately are one of the trickiest to pick.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a lot of characters before I started figuring out flaws without just ruining my...
I steal from my friends is a terrible flaw.
Yeah. That just goes with our general leaning of not working directly against your own party.
Yeah.
That seems to be the most fun games for us.
I don't know. Thieving flaws are always top of mind, that are like, these aren't fun to play out. They're just going to screw over your party and everyone's going to be really frustrated at you.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I don't know, I find like boastful or something like that, like, really fun to kind of play out, because you end up playing this like Zap Brannigan style, Zap Brannigan from Futurama style character, which that's fun and funny. Whereas, like, yeah, every time my friends get into trouble, I'll leave. Like,
right.
That's not a good flaw. So
something that plays out in different ways rather than you have one reaction to multiple situations.
Yeah.
I think is a...
So being able to work that flaw into every session is a lot of fun. I sleep in. Whatever the...
Is that a good flaw?
I don't know. It could be fun.
Maybe.
All right.
So, talking about other character traits, because flaws are kind of that one that throws a wrench in the plans. The next point on our list is using one of the three, because you've got the flaw, then you've got personality trait, bond, and
ideal.
So choosing one of those other three to work into a session as well.
One or three, is that?
Yeah.
I think if you've chosen wisely on all of those traits, bonds and ideals and flaws, they have the potential to show up in every game.
For sure. When I'm starting a character, I try not to focus on them all, because it just it might overwhelm me a little bit, but however you want to do it.
All right. So what are your favorite traits?
The favorite one that I've ever played and that worked really well was hoarding, because it let me...
I know exactly the character you're talking about.
Yeah. It just developed a lot of a cool collection of stuff, and it let me always interact with the environment. It did kind of force you as the DM to get creative sometimes, but...
And role-play the logistics of trying to keep all of that crap around.
Yeah.
Like, it was an interesting, funny flaw / trait. I don't know. Which category did you throw that in?
I don't even know. I think it was a trait.
I think it was a bond. I vow to carry this shit with me
everywhere I go.
So my favorite for me was always gambling, because it always led to more roleplay situations where you could, it was just one of those things where you're like,
it doesn't lead to a negative, but it develops a story.
Yeah, exactly. It always takes you deeper into something.
Yeah.
Whether it was intended or not, you're always just like, I will bet you that this will play out, or every time, and I think there's a good element to any bond or character trait or flaw in that the DM is able to build on it as well.
Yeah.
Because with gambling, I know as a DM that if you choose gambling as a bond, then or a personality trait, that I know an easy way to get you to take the bait on a story hook.
Yeah.
Because all I have to do is put some dude on the corner that's like, hey, you there, I'll bet you whatever, that blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I am in, because you're always going to take that bait. And I think there's also bad traits and bad personality quirks that you can end up choosing that nobody wants to.
Like what?
Well, the first one that jumps to my mind, honestly, is the quiet and brooding type.
Right.
And I'm going to own up to this one personally. I didn't actually write it into any one of the character traits, but it was definitely one of the personality traits that I was trying to play out.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just save you a bunch of time if you're thinking about using this one. It sucks because you're basically committing to just sitting there quietly during the game and just like being angry the whole time. And it's like, who wants to play with this person?
I think we've all fallen into that trap when making a character, and you picture it as being a badass in the corner that
I'm
everyone's
gonna play Batman.
wondering what you're thinking, but it comes across as, oh, he's not saying anything.
This
Who
guy's
cares?
an asshole. Who invited this person to this game? Yeah, no, for sure.
And then one that I always think doesn't play out well is one that stretches you past your own either creative ability or knowledge. Like, I come up with witty riddles for every occasion. It's like, can you do that?
Yeah.
Or
are you going to be sitting there Googling a riddle every game?
Yeah.
Or are you actually clever enough to come up with your own riddles, which... I know that I'm not mentally sharp enough to come up with a decent riddle.
Me too.
Therefore, I'm going to be sitting on my phone trying to Google a riddle, and everyone's just going to be annoyed by it.
Yeah. I try not to have roleplay traits that are smarter than I am.
Good call. Step 1, don't play Mastermind, because none of us are really that smart.
All right, so the next topic is mechanics. What can you do as a player building your story to enhance the mechanics of the game?
For me, I would definitely put this on the checklist. That is, be prepared for your spells. Be prepared for the mechanics of your spells and know your spells. So whether that's using an app for all of your spell information, being able to recall it very quickly. I mean, you use cards, and I always really appreciate that, because even though you know your spells really, really well, if anyone ever has any questions or anything like that, or there's any kind of discrepancy, it's right there.
Yeah, there's always one detail of a spell that you can't think of that might affect the game.
I think for role-playing, it's really handy as well, because you can quickly look up kind of spell components, and you're like, for mass suggestion, I crush up a snake tongue and a piece of honeycomb and blah, blah, blah. And like, you can actually deliver specifics on those.
Pull it out.
Which is handy.
Which, on that point, beyond having those with you, pre-planning at least one of them should go on the checklist. So what I mean by that is my girlfriend Rumor has a druid character that she has come up with the actual magic phrase for each spell.
The verbal component of all of her spells.
The verbal component, which gets us all into the game so much more when she says that Latin phrase than I cast conjure animals.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Good call. Yeah, no, every time Romer starts to utter that phrase, everyone gets jacked at the table.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to say the name of the spell.
We
know she's about to conjure 2 wolves. Mm-hmm. And we're just like, yeah, this is happening.
Makes it way better.
Yeah. She has every single one of her spells with usually she even has like kind of a hand gestures that she uses as well. So props to her for that. But I think kind of bare minimum, just figure out something that you can do that isn't necessarily just saying the spell that you're doing. If anyone questions it, then you have that ready with the spell card.
Right. And keep in mind, this doesn't just apply to spells. I mean, you can do it with melee abilities. You can do it with any other class abilities.
Too true, yeah. If you're a melee fighter, you can just say, you know what? At some point during this game, I want to, because if combat is coming up, which usually happens in most sessions, that this is I'm going to try and pull off this maneuver.
Yeah.
And then you're like, you go into combat, figuring out how to position yourself and how to and it's just like, oh, what's that person? Cool.
Something beyond, I swing my sword, I roll my dice.
Yeah, that's kind of a personal pet peeve of mine, is just people that play melee fighters and then, or are new to playing melee fighters. Fair enough. It takes time to figure that out. But yeah, the whole like, I swing my sword, is that all there is to this? No, it doesn't have to be.
It can be whatever you want to do.
Yeah, you like, I go for the Achilles tendon and I do a big sweep and
grab the goblin by the neck and slam it into the table.
Yeah, you can make melee fighters a lot of.
My monk, I had a blast coming up with all kinds of weird stuff to do. That's the same guy that hoarded, so.
Yeah, I remember one of your attacks was to hold an eyelid open and punch it right square in the pupil. Yeah, that was fun stuff. Cool. Well, I don't know. I can't think of anything else to go on that list. Can you?
That part of the list is good.
Cool. Let's move on.
All right. So our third part of our checklist today is bonding your party, something that's sometimes overlooked. And the first item on it is we talked about building your own goals and bringing those to the table, but This item is to find out someone else's goal in character and work on that.
Okay. So, like finding out, so my character wants to open a bakery downtown.
So then I ask you what you want to open, and you tell me bakery, and then I go find a flower salesman
Okay, that wasn't where I was
to
expecting.
become a part of the party
Okay.
as an NPC Tag Along. He follows us on all our adventures.
Okay, that's horrible. Don't do that to me in game. No, but I think the point is kind of clear. Not really. The point is figuring out what your other characters in your party's goals are, and trying to kind of insert yourself into them in a way that always bonds a party together.
Yeah.
I think there's too many adventuring parties that are just circumstantial. They're like, oh, well, loot, I guess. That's why we're hanging out.
If the entire party died around you, you'd kind of be like, okay, I'll go find someone else.
Yeah. The next two, I think, are a little bit kind of intertwined. I think they're, in fact, one checklist item.
You just stretched it out.
Yeah, we just tend to run long. But the essence of it is roleplay a bond and develop a bond with one other player. So if we're thinking doing this every single game, finding a way to push that agenda a little bit further, this one is developing a bond with one other player. So finding something that you can bond with them over. And I think you've done a really excellent job at doing this with another one of the players in the party, Arbadon.
Yeah, with my rogue character turned cleric.
Yeah. You're now a cleric, but you are a kind of a shady...
I became a cleric because I saw that he was getting a lot of power from being a cleric. And so with no actual piousness, I started doing cleric things, and it's working for me so far. And it really aggravates his character, but it always creates good roleplay opportunities at the table.
Just tremendous, juicy, ripe roleplay opportunities that come about because one cleric is furious that another one has any real semblance of power because of his immoral and unjust way of living. So little things like that, I think, can add a lot to a particular game and really kind of start to tie all of those characters together in a more meaningful way.
Yeah.
Rather than usually, if I haven't done enough character development and I don't have all of the great, rich kind of bonds that I want to try and work on, I always find it really challenging to think, why is my character sticking around with these people?
Right.
Why are they hanging out as a cohesive group? But they're not really. They're just traveling in the same direction.
Because the same person gave them the same letter.
Exactly.
Like
and you're always reaching for these, like, okay, in this situation, why the hell am I still with them? We're about to get killed. But if you have those deep bonds, this weird, I kind of hate you, I kind of don't bond that you have between those two characters richens the story to go and rescue that man, even though you
have some mixed feelings about them. And if every character has that, it sure takes a lot off of the DM to keep trying to think of ways why the party is sticking together too. So.
Absolutely. And I think another kind of example of how we can do that is really figuring out what your character is after so that you can always seed that for your DM. So for instance, I can test the two of your characters pious, like I can always insert another cleric of Pelor into the game to see how that situation unfolds. And I can keep kind of baiting the two of your characters.
And we've got a solid basis for what we would do already, so it's going to be something interesting.
And it always leads to recurring jokes and shenanigans and fun.
So then the last item on our list is bringing a character trigger to the table. And you do this with physical items, but it can be with anything. So basically, this is just something that gets you into character at the start of the game. Mm-hmm. And so you've done this with your tricorn hat that's really well made. And
that I didn't pay too much money for on eBay.
With one character, and really cool Stein with another character.
just holding that beer stein. So it's this like glass bottom steel stein that's all leather wrapped. And it felt crafty one day. But as soon as I have beer in that mug,
Getting
obviously
that buzz on after a few drinks at the beginning of the game really gets you into character.
Yeah, totally. Getting drunk gets me into character. No, just the act of holding that. I'm like, okay, I'm in it.
Yeah.
And my best example was I dated a lovely woman who was quite a thespian, and she every time she needed to cry, she could cry on command. But it was those triggers, those character cues that she's like, okay, I'm going to listen to this music and I'm going to think this thought. And within less than 10 seconds, she had tears streaming down her face. And it was just the weirdest thing ever. And I think what I'm trying to suggest is doing this to a lesser extent, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as I put on that tricorn hat, that kind of gets me into that mindset.
Another big one that people use is character voices. That's how I always started off, using my character voice. Or just even a phrase really works well for some people. So
yeah.
Think about some of those.
Yeah. Yeah, they can definitely be always helpful. In the end, though, I don't have anything left on the checklist.
That's the completed ongoing checklist.
Completed, not completed.
If you have any other ideas, because we know that you've got better ideas than us, let us know on our social media. We're at Hook and Chance on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Wherever your Twitters are sold. Yeah, so hit us up if you think we missed anything. I think there's, probably some hidden gems in there, and we'll add it to the ongoing list. Download this list on our Patreon. It's for free there. We just tend to use Patreon as a nice place to host all of our stuff and host all of our content and files. So find the completed checklist and keep checking back, because I'm sure we'll add more to it.
So thanks for listening to this episode.
And play great games.